The grand chamber of galactic deliberation was a polished gemstone set in orbit above the gas giant H&R, its translucent ceiling offering a permanent view of a swirling orange-blue storms. Beneath the ceiling was decorative, the floor symbolic, but everything in between was profoundly political. Senators of the Threx Dominion, cloaked in ceremonial black and burnished gold, lounged like overfed reptiles in their velvet lined seats, their forked tongues clicking idly. Clusters of Sephir scholars hovered in brine tanks suspended from the rafters, their gelatinous forms pulsing with boredom. A Gorth war queen idly sharpened her tusks against her throne's obsidian edge. Galactic Congress was in session, which meant hours of posturing, treaty stroking, and just enough venom-laced civility to make a viper look like he. A house bet into this theater of pomp stepped a single human ambassador. Celeste Monroe did not command the room before. She didn't need to. She walked in like a librarian entering a noisy study hall, not angry, just disappointed. She wore a charcoal gray suit with a crimson silk scarf, her silver hair coiled into a churnan as precise as her diction. Her face bore the quiet calm of someone who'd survived more wars than most had read about, and her eyes ice blue, inquisitive, patient, catalogued every twitch in the room. Esteemed delegates, she said with a kind of smile that invited cookies but suggested poison might also be on the tray. Earth thanks you for the opportunity to clarify the unfortunate incidents along the perimeter drift. The THRE speaker, Lord Verishthal, whose mandibles clicked in distaste whenever a human addressed him directly, leaned forward. You refer to the incursion into sovereign empire space. I refer, Celeste said gently, to a navigational misunderstanding prompted by inconsistent star chart overlays issued by your mapping bureau. We feel ready, offered reparations along with copies of our corrected maps should you wish to avoid further missteps. Muffled chuckles rippled through the Sephir delegation. The Gorth war queen grunted in approval. Lord Virish narrowed his isolates. Humans are always quick with apologies and quicker with excuses. And quicker still, Celeste replied, still smiling at building new friends out of old enemies. Silence settled, wary and watching. This wasn't Earth's first foray into diplomacy. The human tendency to smile while maneuvering terrified the elder species more than they'd admit. Everyone of them remembered the drill accord, how Earth negotiated peace between two warring systems and walked away with 12 mining rights and an accidental moon. Verisis, the Empire believes in clarity. You speak of peace while violating our borders. You offer dialogue while repositioning satellites near our trade lanes. Celeste nodded with sympathetic gravity. It must be exhausting assuming every action is a threat on Earth. We call that paranoia. There are treatments. Another chuckle, less muffled this time. The imperial dignitary beside Vish, a younger Threx with a taste for dramatic, slammed a clawed fist on the table. Enough word games. The Empire demands sanctions, and an Earth. Celeste interrupted, demands a fair review by neutral systems, perhaps the Pavari or the Dwelt Tribunal, or shall we let the public vote? We humans love democracy. The younger Threx hissed in disbelief. You mock the council. Celeste's expression didn't change, but her voice dropped half a tone. I mocked the pretense of justice wrapped in ritual. I mock the belief that thunderous voices make truer claims. And I mock shed softly enough to make everyone lean in, the idea that the galaxy remains unaware of what truly motivates this empire. Fear. Virish mandibles flared. You presume too much. No, she said, I calculate. The room stilled. That was the thing about humans. They never barked before they bit. They made spreadsheets. They studied. They sent people like Celeste, grandmotherly, refined, devastating tosmile at you while they built your obituary. But not everyone in the room understood the warning behind her manners. 3 days later, she was dead. The attack was swift, surgical, and denied with eloquent falsity. A shuttle malfunction en route to a summit on Viridin 6. Wreckage scattered across a moonfield. No survivors. The Galactic Council offered condolences. The Empire issued a blank-faced regret. Earth, for once, said nothing except for a brief line from her broadcast once across the diplomatic channels. Ambassador Celeste Monroe will no longer attend the negotiations, but her terms remain. There was something strange about that sentence. Aliens parsed it, debated it, dismissed it, but the humans, oh, the humans didn't flinch. They kept their embassies open, their posture calm, their eyes unblinking. At the same time, odd things began to happen. A Threx military transport disappeared en route to a weapons depot. Its black box was found floating near a human trade beacon, playing a soft earth lullaby on loop. A counselor's accounts were drained, not stolen, redirected with receipts to a non-existent human charity named the Celeste Memorial Fund for Galactic Patients. And across the back channels rumors began, not loud, not official, but whispered by maintenance droids and rogue data clerks, spreading faster than logic could suppress them. They said she came back, not in body. No, the body was gone, but her voice, her words. She's in the satellites, murmured a Pavari clerk, trembling. I downloaded an old speech, offers to study. My lights flickered. She spoke to me, said I had potential. I swear me ship turned on me, said a 3X pilot, drunk and desperate. The AI quoted her, said, don't worry, darling, regret is educational. Then my weapons disable themselves. She left something behind, whispered an old Gore general now retired, not a legacy, a system, a map, a plan. Weeks past, systems fell silent. Not with violence, but with compliance. Entire sectors rewrote their protocol, stations locked their gates, and played Earth music. No signs of human ships, just smiles everywhere, painted, printed, coded into airlock readings. One morning a delivery arrived at the Empire's main archive, a sealed crate with no return label inside, one ceramic teapot still warm, and a handwritten note: thank you for your hospitality. You may want to check your network integrity. You've left so many doors open. Warmest regards. See. Verishthal began to unravel. He issued threats. None responded. He called emergency councils. The lights flickered. The air always smelled faintly of lavender, Celeste's favorite perfume. He tried purging their systems, but every purge triggered protocols in perfect Earth English terms and conditions. May apply. Virish screamed into his terminal. What conditions? The screen flashed. A soft voice, hers, spoke from the speaker's. Politeness is a weapon you chose. War. That night he found a single envelope on his pillow, inside a napkin folded into the shape of a wolf, written on it, she wasn't our diplomat, she was our leash. And you let go. Vish didn't sleep after that. Across the stars they whispered her name now with dread, not as ambassador, not as human, but as something older, something colder. They called her Baba Yaga. And the Empire, once loud with smug confidence, began speaking in whispers, planning in hushed tones, waiting for what Earth would do next. They didn't understand the silence. They thought they'd won, but they never read the terms. They never read the fine print. And humans, oh, we always leave a clause. The stars above Cinder Prime shimmered like lies told, beautifully glittering, dangerous and distant enough to forget consequences. On the 9th orbital ring of the Threxian Empire's core world, High Executive Draw was pouring himself a drink. He wasn't celebrating, he was surviving the silence for weeks. That's how long it had been since Ambassador Celeste Monroe's alleged death. Since then his sleep had been scattered, full of static-filled dreams and muttered human phrases that made no sense. It started suddenly, a pause in military communications, a blinking console, then a fleet-wide update that every Threxian vessel had to verify Earth origin firmware before re-engaging. That should have happened. Earth had no access, no authorization, and yet now Themepire's top communications hub on 7 was broadcasting only one sentence on repeat: the memory of a woman is more dangerous than her death. Draw set the glass down untouched. He didn't fear ghosts, he feared systems, because ghosts don't reroute fleets. Ghosts don't turn your own supply chains against you. Ghosts don't smile in the code, but a human, especially that human, they do it without blinking. He stared at the sealed packet on his desk, a white envelope, wax stamped with the Earth emblem. No delivery logs, no personnel admitted, yet it was there, resting atop classified files like it belonged. He opened it. Inside, one Earth tea bag and a note in familiar script: lemon balm for nerves, I hear yours are fraying. See, no threats, no demands, just polite observation, the kind that made his throat tighten. Across the galaxy the pattern repeated. Empire warships found their food supplies delayed, not missing, simply reorganized to appear beneath the names of fictional human charities. Navigation charts began rerouting into minor asteroid field that spelled in Terran English oops. And in every corridor where lights flickered, Ordoers refused to open. Someone whispered her name, Celeste, or more precisely Baba Yaga. Not every alien species understood the reference, but fear doesn't require translation. The Council of 15 met in secret on Hakarn Vault, not in the grand amphitheater of diplomacy, but in a cold underground room sealed in lead and ancient faith. This is psychological warfare, hissed Corda of the Venti. Earth is using her memory like a sword, Shestead barked. War, Prince Jack of the Grolash, I saw the report. You saw our port, we wrote. The GTH matriarch growled. You think she didn't see that coming? The room simmered with unease. Senator Thvela Sepir floated forward, translucent tendrils pulsing a muted yellow. I downloaded one of her last transmissions to analyze it for patterns. He said it spoke to me. Jack leaned in. Spoke how it asked how my daughter was adjusting to off-world schooling. Thvel said softly, her name is unlisted. The file should not have known it. The silence was brutal. Someone exhaled like a death sentence. Then what if the matriarch whispered, she's not truly dead? That hung like smoke over a battlefield, the kind of question that starts wars or ends them. A young diplomat from the outer rim, barely old enough to vote in his quadrant, spoke up timidly. Even if she is gone, she prepared for this. She didn't leave a hole, she left a trap, a long, slow burning trap, and we're already inside it. It wasn't just data, it was personnel. Entire battalions trained under the Human Galactic Exchange program were quietly shifting loyalty, not loudly, not violently, but effectively. A security commander on Threxian mining colony Epsilon X7 defected without a word left behind, only a letter. We don't fight for flags, we fight for futures. She taught us that at the diplomatic outpost of New Prague on Delios. For an old janitor found himself standing on a catwalk, watching the red sun bleed into the horizon. His mop leaned beside him in his hand. A communicator blinked with an incoming message, unmarked, Earth-coded. He didn't answer it, he just nodded. I knew she wasn't gone. He muttered. The good ones didn't leave you, they just upgrade. Behind him the lights dimmed and the station's AI voice, once chirpy and sterile, now spoke in her cadence. Hello Tomas, ready to clean house. Meanwhile Earth remained calm, too calm. The United Terran Consulate issued no condemnation, no threats, just forwarded birthday wishes to various planetary dignitaries. They even sent Threxian delegates a fruit basket, yet everywhere systems failed politely. Threxian propaganda broadcasts were overwritten with human documentaries about extinct predators. One featured a smiling woman walking through a digital museum narrating, see here the trapor spider, it waits perfectly still for years until the moment is right. Some call it patient, some call it cruel, but really it's just prepared. Celeste's voice, but the footage was old, or was it? At the Galactic Academy, a student accessed a hollow book she thought was unrelated human poetry, subtle violence with metaphor, and was met with a full hologram of the ambassador herself sipping tea beside a fire. She smiled. Oh good, you found me. The student screamed, but not because she was afraid, because the figure blinked and quoted a line from her dissertation she hadn't published yet. Somewhere near the breached nebula, a rogue faction of Threxian rebels received coordinates from an anonymous source. They expected an abandoned weapons cache. What they found was a hidden human installation dormant for years, fully stocked, quietly tracking every galactic transaction for the past decade. Waiting, a note pinned Toth, console, you've been very predictable. Let's try something new. Consider this a gift. Do use it wisely. See, the rebels, former soldiers cast out by Empire hierarchy, didn't ask permission. They activated the station within and Horthid spread a virus through Threxian defense relays. No deaths, just sleep mode. The Empire ships slept for 12 hours. When they woke, their system logs had been altered. They now listed their designation under Celestial Holdings Temporary Custodian Monroe. See, the shift was no longer theory, it was action. Non-lethal, non-hostile, but undeniably human in one distinct way. Memory weaponized humanity. Didn't rage, it didn't scream, it simply remembered and made sure you did too. Every alien who'd mocked Earth's sentimentality now watched as empathy became a knife, as grief became organization, as every word Celeste ever said returned like thunder. After lightning, one Gore commander, disgraced and drunk in a trade hub cantina, slammed his claws on the table. She warned us. He muttered, said she'd make us regret. Underestimating kin. Nessa, traitor, beside him, pale and shaking, whispered. They say she left gifts in every sector. What kind of gifts? Reminders, algorithms, traps. She didn't build an army, she built consequences. Back on Earth, in a garden surrounded by snow-capped peaks, a woman walked slowly, one hand on a cane, the other holding a data slate. Celeste Monroe, alive, quiet, watching. Her eyes weren't angry, just tired of pretending to be something less than what she was. Beside her, an aide blinked at the reports pouring in. Ma'am, he said. The Empire just offered unconditional negotiation terms. Did they bring tea? They brought a fleet. Celeste sighed. How predictable. You think they'll actually apologize? No, she said. But they'll learn, that's the point. Mercy, Izizi, memories, the hard part. She looked out at the Valley Bird's wind piece. They killed the diplomat, she whispered, but they made a tactician behind her. Encrypted satellites aligned, not for war, for conversation, for leverage, for timing. The storm wasn't coming, it had already arrived, and it smiled. The galaxy mistook silence for peace. A week had passed since the Threx Empire's last attempt to reassert dominance. They'd launched a full fleet, polished and posturing toward the disputed border of the Caro Expanse, where human satellites now blinked politely in low orbit, broadcasting Labibus and tax codes. The fleet never arrived. They weren't destroyed, that would have been crude. They were repositioned delicately, thoroughly, with all the finesse of a stage hand adjusting scenery before a play. When the ships reappeared, they were in symmetrical formation above a noon-inhabited moon, all systems intact, but renamed. Their transponders now identified them as part of Celestial Transit Authority Regional Library Division. It was the detail that rattled people, not the threat, but the insult. Each ship had been assigned a duodecimal number. In the Imperial War Room, Admiral Forex stared at the blinking map in disbelief. We lost control of 20 ships, he said. But we still have power shields, weapons, comms, why not destroy them? Across from him, Tactical Minister Rex rubbed his temples. Because destruction is obvious and she doesn't too obvious. She now. No one said her name aloud anymore, not in rooms with security feeds. Celeste Monroe, or as she was now whispered, the Baba Yaga. Admiral Forex leaned closer. How does a dead woman reprogram fleets? She didn't, T-Rex said quietly. She anticipated. There's no hacking involved, no breach. These ships were updated routinely through Empire-approved firmware patches, and we approve those. Yes, Rex nodded grimly, every single one. The silence between them was the kind that built empires or burned them. She used the update process, Forex muttered, as a delivery system 3 years ago. Rex confirmed she didn't just plan for war, she planned for our assumptions. In the corner, a younger analyst cleared her throat. She also renamed all shipboard AI to Beatrice. The analyst hesitated. There's a quote from Earth literature. Beatrice, the guide through hell elsewhere on the jungle moon of Dearest 12. A diplomatic summit began unraveling in real time. The Venturi had gathered top proposed sanctions against Earth. The Sepir, floating in their ambient tanks, were hesitant but curious. The Goroth simply sharpened their claws. Then the humans arrived, not warriors, not diplomats. 3 elderly women in Earth shawls, smiling politely, bearing cookies. The room paused. Who are you? Asked the Venti envoy, his tendrils twitching. We're the Monroe Accord Foundation, said the shortest woman cheerfully. Ambassador Monroe left us a few instructions, hope you don't mind. They distributed folders, handwritten inside each a detailed psychological profile of every representative in the room, like spheres, past transgressions, and a cover page. Let's not pretend we don't already know each other. The meeting dissolved into chaos, and when order was restored, the Goroth stood and said, we side with Earth, at least they don't lie about their claws. The story changed after that. Celeste Monroe was no longer a memory, she was an active condition. You had to factor her in like gravity or taxes, because what she'd built wasn't revenge, it wasn't even war, it was narrative control. She had become the history. Everyone else was reacting to each diplomatic corridor now bore her influence. Every negotiation carried the question. What did she plan for? What did she see coming? And worse, what smile had we misunderstood? The Threxian Minister of Internal Order Gralvis found himself increasingly paranoid. His staff stopped using certain phrases around him. They feared triggering something, some latent command from a farewell speech she'd made 8 months ago. Don't say coffee, one aide warned. Last time we did, the lights blinked out and the printer spat out a limerick. A limerick? The aide nodded. Pale about your secret offshore account on Batrix 3 rhymed perfectly, sir. He didn't say coffee again. It wasn't that. Earth had grown stronger militarily. They were still a small power, but now everyone watched them because no one wanted to be the next punchline in a trap set by a smile. At the heart of it was Celeste. No matter how far anyone looked, they found her fingerprints. Entire sectors of AI-generated diplomatic code were suddenly revealed to have embedded Monroe-style syntax, kind clipped and passive-aggressively omniscient trade agreements she touched had opt-out clauses no one ever noticed until they auto-triggered, transferring rights back to Earth. A shipping alliance folded after realizing they'd inadvertently signed over their docking ports. During a toast she toasted with a custom blend of Turan whiskey labeled "Here's to Clarity." It was the password she knew. They'd eavesdrop, she'd planned the misinterpretation. She turned diplomacy into theater, and they hadn't read the script. On the far side of the galaxy, in a forgotten mining town on an ice moon, a tired Threxian captain walked into a human cafe. The barista nodded. Double shot, no cream, just how Ambassador Monroe liked it. The captain froze. I never said my order hadn't need to. The barista smiled. She left notes. The drink was good, too good. The captain left a tip, found a card slipped into his jacket. An hour later. It's not loyalty if it's convenient, it's belief when it costs you something. See, eventually someone tried to confront her, not kill. No one was that foolish anymore, but one last stand, one last chance. Toadman, surrender or confession or anything. They found her at an old Earth villa surrounded by sun and soil, not a fortress, just a garden. She met them with lemonade and a linen blouse. General Torvac, 6 feet of scaled muscle, tried diplomacy. First, you've destabilized the Empire. No, she said softly, the Empire was unstable. I just provided gravity. You've threatened the entire galactic order. Celeste sipped. Did I, or did I show with mirror? Torvac paced. You could have asked for war, we would have answered. She looked at him, then fully. That's the difference, General. You wait for war, we prepare for the story that follows. He sat. He didn't know why that night 100 ships withdrew from the Imperial fleet. They didn't defect loudly, they just stopped responding. The AI systems offered one message: we choose memory. The Empire, what was left of it, fell into argument. Some demanded retaliation, others demanded clarification. None could agree on what Celeste hadn't already planned. For she wasn't a warrior, she wasn't even present, but the fear of her thinking. Still thinking kept half the galaxy from sleep. One junior tactician, trying to console his commander, said, "It's just psychology." "No," the commander whispered, "it's marketing." He gestured at the hollow display where Celeste's face, smiling, ever smiling, was emblazoned on intercepted data packages now circulating in memes, quotes, and motivational videos. A smile. He said, "I just a trap with good marketing." And somewhere in that sun-drenched garden, Celeste closed her eyes and listened, toe to soil, to silence, to the sound of empires unraveling, not through battle but through doubt. Because she didn't conquer, she reminded. She didn't burn bridges, she made you walk back across them. Wondering if they were ever real. The trap was never the tech or the fleets or the threats, it was her, the soft voice, the kind tone, the patience, because Celeste didn't smile because she was harmless, she smiled because you were already caught. The great assembly dome above Threx Prime had not been filled in centuries, not since the Empire's bloodless annexation of the Delari Reach, but today every seat was occupied. Delegates, war masters, envoys, and media drones buzzing like anxious hornets. They had not come to celebrate, they had come to understand. Across the central Ds stood the figure they feared but could not ignore, Celeste Monroe, alive, whole, wearing black. She did not walk in like a ghost, she walked in like gravity, inevitable, unhurried, and entirely unimpressed by spectacle. The galaxy had spoken her name in whispers, turned her into myth, wrapped her in the kind of reverence reserved for monsters that were too elegant to hate and too dangerous to forget. But today the myth breathed, and she smiled. Thank you for receiving me, she began, voice amplified, not by technology but by stillness. It is rare to see so many important people gathered in one room without artillery between them. No one laughed. Across from her high executive jaw stood like a blade dulled by fear. He had led the operation that faked her death, signed the order, stamped the seal. He hadn't seen her since, until now. You died, he said, not as accusation but as prayer. No, Celeste replied gently. I was edited. A flicker rippled through the delegates' cameras, adjusted translators whispered in a dozen dialects. You orchestrated the largest collapse of Imperial infrastructure in recorded history, said a Venti ambassador. Why now? Why return? Celeste turned her gaze slowly across the sea of faces. Because you still don't understand what happened. Draw stepped forward, his voice brittle. Then explain it for the record. Celeste's smile softened. We smiled first, she said. You just didn't ask why. She stepped down from the Ds, walked the floor like a teacher in a hostile classroom. You thought our smiles were submission, that we laughed because we're small, that we negotiated because we were afraid. You mistook kindness for confusion, and you mistook Earth for prey. She paused beside a Sephiri tank, the ambassador inside curling his tendrils nervously. But smiling isn't surrender, it's camouflage. The wolf wears wool until the gate is open. The Sephri nodded slowly. We see that now. Celeste raised an eyebrow. Do you truly? She motioned to the screens above. They flickered to life, showing security footage, command reports, intercepted communications, each one threaded with her voice or her influence. Not by force, but by design. You didn't just kill a diplomat, you activated a protocol. The room bristled. You weren't punished, you were studied, measured, documented. I needed the right moment. And what moment is this? Draw snapped. The moment you listen. Across the galaxy, Earth remained curiously still. No fleets, no threats, just patterns imperceptible, unless you were looking. Systems changed, language, transit lanes restructured themselves, trade routes collapsed and rebuilt in unfamiliar shapes. War, Celeste said, is expensive, blood is loud, but memory is surgical. The screens shifted again, displayed dozens of former enemies now aligned under Earth's economic umbrella. Quietly, voluntarily, you expected fire, I gave you architecture, you dismantled us, whispered Gorith Matriarch without lifting a hand. Celeste nodded. Because the Empire was built on fear and fear folds. When you show it a mirror, you planned this, said from the start. No, she said, from the middle. When I realized that diplomacy wasn't enough, when I realized you would never understand peace until you feared it. The chamber quivered with tension. One brave delegate stood, a young Trilassi woman, feathers puffed in confusion. But what do you want? Celeste turned and for the first time let the steel show beneath the silk. To be remembered correctly, she raised her hand above the screens, shifted to show a single planet, small, blue, beautiful Earth, spinning quietly. Humans are not kind because harmless, we're kind because we remember what it's like to burn. She stepped closer to the center again. You thought you could erase me, but memory doesn't die. At that moment, every screen in the dome went black. Then a single phrase appeared in every tongue. She isn't the monster, she is the consequence. Drawbacked away. What have you done? Made you pay attention. Across the stars, 1,000 preset actions triggered simultaneously. Mining rights once held by the Empire reverted to neutral systems. Financial algorithms collapsed. Debt chains tied to imperial expansion. A dozen puppet governments suddenly announced independence with the same signature on their declarations. None of this required war, Celeste said, only patience and a few good notebooks. The Gorith Matriarch laughed, once deep guttural. You are the scariest person in his room. No, Celeste replied, I'm just the first one who stopped lying. She turned to draw one final time. You killed the diplomat, you made me a tactician, and now the galaxy listens because it fears the sound of a woman remembering. Then she turned her back to him. She walked slowly from the chamber, not rushed, not chased. No one followed, no one stopped her. She had already won, but she had done it with a smile. The trap wasn't laid today, it had been sprung, and as the doors closed behind her, every delegate sat in silence, wondering when the next smile would come and whether it too had